Yes, please, we can start. Yeah. Good morning. I think it's 4 o'clock over there, right? Yeah, please. Thank you.
Has 25 years of teaching experience in UG and post-graduation level, and he has 15 years of research experience in the field of discourse studies, second language teaching, critical theories, semantics, and pragmatics. He has the following 5 books to his credits: An Interpretive Discourse on Concepts of Freedom, A Study on the Language of Resistance and Rebellion, Dimensions in Discourse, Elementary to Essentials, Perspectives in Postmodernism, A Terminological Debate, Paradoxes in Scattered Reflection. He has published several books, chapters, and innumerable research articles in peer-reviewed international journals. He served as a resource person in several national and international conferences and seminars. More than 40 articles were published in national and international dailies. His columns in The Hindu enriches knowledge of the readers. He is serving as a member, advisory board, scholar critic, and International Journal of Language, Literature, and Cultural Studies, member, review panel, Journal of English Language Teaching, Literature Study, member, review panel, International Journal of Education for the Future, member, review panel, Interdisciplinary Journal of Humanities. We are so excited about your intellectual stimulating session, sir. Now you can start your session, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this exceedingly flattering introduction. It's really, very difficult to start talking about issues connected to language teaching, teaching of literature in the post-lunch session. In the words of G.K. Chesterton, he said once, our perspectives changes after lunch, post-lunch. So it is in this context, I think I am coming to you with lots and lots of things I feel like sharing. Before I start my presentation, I like to place on record my sincere appreciation for the organizers for having identified a theme which I believe very relevant, appropriate in the context wherein we are placed. The theme of this conference: inclusive pedagogical strategies in language classes, humanist approach. I am particularly interested in this particular theme because of 2 reasons. We are going to talk about pedagogies, inclusive pedagogies. Number 2, humanist approach. Most of you would be thinking that theme is quite, or the title is quite uninspiring title. I agree with you. Because in this context, people must be talking about artificial intelligence mediated teaching, language teaching using computers, computer assisted language learning and teaching, technology assisted language learning and teaching. So anything connected to these should have been a discussion in this digital age. Despite this fact, I think the organizers have identified this theme, for which I think I have to appreciate them. Because I believe inclusive pedagogy, the term has got transformative power. What I am going to share with you today might be revealing my links with the old schools of thinking. Please bear me out. You may be thinking, these are old-fashioned ideas, and this person doesn't want to change. He doesn't want to accept the changing realities. He doesn't want to understand what's going on the back door. These are the things you might be thinking in your mind. I agree with you. But kindly wait until my presentation over, and then you pass your judgment on my perspectives on language teaching and literature teaching from humanist angle. But before I start, I got to tell you this. I don't know whether I'll be able to do justice to these 2 areas. Teaching of English from humanist perspective and teaching of literatures in humanist perspective. I think these are two different things. I don't know whether I'll be able to do justice to these two things, but I'll try to cover at least language aspect in this session. Now, my dear friends, language teaching has undergone phenomenal changes. There are lots and lots of contextual changes. These contextual changes influence our perspectives of language teaching. As a result of these changes, today we find so much of use of technology, overuse of technology, use of artificial intelligence in language classrooms. We are doing it even in my context. I'm also actually a part of that particular system. Computer assisted language learning and teaching. Now, after having applied technology in our classes, relying too much on technology in our classes, when we try to analyze the outcome of this process, how far our students have been able to acquire the skills needed for handling different situations, needed for effective communication. If you ask this question, the answer is disappointing. No doubt our students have been able to pick up language skills. They've been able to speak, but do they speak appropriately? They think speaking very fast, speaking continuously, that is actually a mark of learning. But my question is, are we speaking sensibly? Are we bringing meaning to the words? Are we loading our words with meanings? Is there any appropriacy in our communication? So these are the questions I'm going to ask in this particular context. Time and again, research has proved that what our students are lacking today, sensitivity, culture sensitivity, in terms of understanding complex realities, it's mere parrot-like repetition of certain set patterns they have learned. It is not speaking sensibly. I can give you plenty of examples at a later point of time in my session. So what are students lacking in? Contextual intelligence, culture intelligence, culture complications. These are the things that our students should have been aware of. Now, the fears of artificial intelligence, they have haunted humanity for several years, at least since the advent of computer age. Over the past couple of years, artificial intelligence tools, they have emerged as a threat. It has emerged as a threat to the very survival of human civilization. We are actually facing this threat from different directions and different dimensions. No doubt, artificial intelligence has gained some remarkable abilities to manipulate and generate languages, whether with words or sounds or with images. But the fact is, it has already hacked the operating system of human civilization. This is where I think we need to connect my discussion. My discussion is, let's stop for a while. Let's rethink about the processes that we have been engaged in classroom. Let's engage ourselves more in talking, understanding the realities from realistic perspectives, humanistic perspectives, rather than being influenced by certain research findings, the results of which, today, when we see, disappointed. So what I'm going to focus today is, we need to go back, we need to reflect, and we need to ask ourselves why we are not being adopting the sensible practices advocated by, Carl Rogers or Abraham Maslow's. These are the people who actually advocated this humanistic approach to language teaching. Why we are not being actually paying special attention to these? They have been excluded. A kind of treatment that has been given, so sorry to say, it is not actually, it is not what it actually merits. So before I start, I'm starting with this strong belief and strong statement that our students, despite the language skills they claim they have acquired, they lack in social linguistic competence, by which I mean being able to understand where we are and the speaker, the listener, the context, the topic that we'll be discussing, understanding various factors which influence in this communication process, All these things could be accommodated in social linguistic competence, which our students are lacking because of too much of dependence on technology. The second thing is lacking in culture sensitivity. Language, as you all know, is a culture manifestation. Language itself is a culture code. Different societies use different expressions because of different culture orientations. We might be greeting in India in one way. People here in Arab context greeting in different way. When we use English language for greeting, the greeting of our culture getting reflected in the second language that we use. So in this particular situation, students coming from one culture, understanding the speakers of other languages, although they speak in the same second language, but the cultures are different. Their cultures are different. Because of these different cultures, they'll be speaking in different ways. We may not be able to understand what they say, although we understand what they say. So I strongly believe that culture sensitivity is something that we need to inculcate. Contextual intelligence is also another important thing that we need to inculcate. See, all these three things could be possible only when we promote pragmatic competence, which I think lacking in our context. Then the question is, what is pragmatic competence? How can we understand? And how can we inculcate pragmatic competence in through humanistic teaching? Pragmatic competence is actually based on an assumption that communication is not always a rule-governed process. It's not just mere by learning the language you'll be able to communicate effectively. It is a sensitivity related matter. In other words, I would say in pragmatics, we try to relate the words that we use to the context. The words that we use as you meaning only in particular context. We need to have contextual understanding before understanding the words. Otherwise, the words would be devalued of their own meanings. So what do we mean by context here? Context might include situational context, social context, culture context, mental context, also textual context. Are we actually creating conditions in the classroom wherein our students are sensitive towards these contextual changes? The answer is obvious. Hence, I believe that we need to advocate pragmatic competence by adopting humanistic approaches in our classroom to achieve the results which are required today. So, how have we reached this pragmatic competence? Before you understand pragmatic competence, we need to understand the background. The background is Chomsky, 1956 and 1960s. He introduced a competence called linguistic competence, by which he meant grammatical competence, understanding of the roots of grammar. But Delheims, when he came in, he redefined that Chomsky's grammatical competence and included social linguistic sensitivities. So what Chomsky introduced as grammatical competence has become social linguistic competence in the hands of Himes. As you all know, social linguistic competence precisely deal with mastery of culture rules, understanding culture complications in communication. And then from social linguistic competence, Canale and Swine, they developed on this and then they introduced strategic competence. By strategic competence, what they mean is using language appropriately in order to achieve the intended meaning. So what we started as grammatical competence, turning out to be social linguistic competence, and then we have strategic competence, and then discourse competence, how words and phrases and sentences that have been used, they come together in order to create context for communication. Discourse is not just related to words. It's something beyond words, looking at the text beyond the boundaries of language. How can communication take place beyond these boundaries of language? Understanding of which is actually discourse competence. And then actional competence is an expression introduced by Celsi, by which ability to perform, understanding speech functions. See, we all use language, but we fail to understand the speech functions, the aspects of speech functions of language. In pragmatic competence, we try to understand the speech functions in relation to one aspect with another aspect. For example, there is a function called locatory function. There is a function called illocatory function. There is a function called perlocatory function. This location, illocation, relocation, these expressions are accommodated in pragmatic competence introduced by Littlewoods in 2011. So now, for a single statement, the statement might have different meanings, different ideas, different senses in different contexts. Take, for example, when I say it is sultry, someone would be looking at it from location point of view. Then you would say sultry means, well, the person doesn't get enough air, is not feeling comfortable. Then this is locatory function, which means literary meaning of what the statement is. But the second level is illocatory function, wherein it is sultry implies someone might think that I'm asking the person to turn on the AC or open the windows. The third level prelocation function is someone would certainly go and perform that action. So for a single statement, there are three different speech acts, speech functions, which we need to understand. So it is in pragmatic competence, we'll be able to bring this kind of dimension in language teaching. Now let's go to the essentials of it. In humanistic perspectives in language teaching, we actually understand culture implications, culture negotiation, and culture interaction. That's what language teaching all about. Language, as I previously mentioned, is a culture code. The ways of greeting, thanking, complaining, requesting, apologizing, talking about future would be reflecting where we are actually from. I can give you plenty of examples, but I've been reminded of my time, so I'm limiting myself, not giving examples, giving you only these ideas. If time permits, hopefully I'll be able to explain these things a little broader. Then, how do we essentially understand humanistic approach? I think you all people know, I'm just reminding you of once again. In humanistic approach, individuals matter. The mental and private world of the learners matter. The non-observable behavior of humans matter. Take, for example, in behaviorism, we talk about conditioning processes, operant conditioning, classical conditioning, and all. All these things are observable behavior. But do you know there is something which is non-observable? So the non-observable behavior of individuals can be taken care of only in humanistic approach. Why this approach not popular? Why has it been excluded today is a question that we need to ask ourselves. It is a non-directive approach. It's a client-centered approach. It is a reaction to the tenets of behaviorism, and it's an opposition to that behaviorist theory. Now, let's talk about the basic principle of this humanistic learning theory. The basic principle is this: theories do not predict human behaviors. Theories do not predict human behaviors, but theories can help us understand human behavior. This is the basic difference between humanistic approach to language teaching and behaviorist approach to language teaching. Behaviorists presuppose, imagine that they'll be able to predict how humans would behave based on certain conditioning processes, based on certain tangible results. But I believe this cannot be true. You would be looking at only the tangible aspects of the behavior, the observable aspects of the behavior, because theories cannot actually predict human behaviors, but theories can help you, can help us understand human behaviors. That is where humanistic approach differs from the behaviorist approach. Now, it differs from mentalist approach too, introduced by Chomsky. In mentalist approach, we talk about innateness. The innateness, we all have got innate capacity to learn language. So learning a language is quite automatic. It is quite automatic. No effort is required. Things will happen at a particular point of time. All the things we are supposed to learn, we are born with. That is there in us. The outside world is just a suggestion. When that suggestion happens, the suggestion would relate what is there in our mind, and then as a result of which is learning. This is how Chomsky would understand the mentalist approach to language teaching. But in behaviorism, we actually look at it in a different angle. We talk about, you all know It has been introduced by Paulo and Skinner, talking about conditioning, both classical and operant conditioning. I don't want to go into it. And wherein we talk about, reinforcement and punishment and stimulus, repetition and reinforcement. These are all things connected to operant and classical conditioning. But my question is, are we not treating humans as animals? Don't you think so? Do you think we would fall into the pattern just like that? Do you know we think in unpredictable ways? Do you know we are subject to change? Do you know our world is totally different? So when you emphasize so much on human behaviorist approach, we are dehumanizing that. This is not the way in which we should be looking at language learning and teaching problems. So that's why this theory, humanist theory, is vehemently against, it is a reaction against the dehumanizing practices in education. Then humanistic learning theory ideas are a few. I'm going to list them out, and then I don't know whether I have time to explain these things. Number one, as I told you, it's against behaviorist paradigm. Number two, it doesn't rely on test score. You can't predict how a student will learn based on the person's past performances. The test score need not necessarily be good reflections of what the student has actually learned. The test score might be reflecting certain aspects. It need not be directly connected to the learning. So there are certain portions missing here that we need to understand. So don't pass judgments based on the scores of the students. Then it doesn't like overcrowded classroom. Classroom itself is a myth. We all exist as individuals. In a class is not actually a basket of apples. Let's not assume in that way. The students might be in the same class, doesn't mean all the students have got the same level of learning style. They are not standing on the same stages of learning. They are not standing on the same stages of civilization. Though they are of the same age, technically, though they are of the same level, technically, that's only for administrative purpose. So that it doesn't approve that the class is a real conditioning process. Class is a myth. It doesn't approve of that. And then teachers should not be told what they should be teaching in the class. It actually emphasizes more on emergent curriculum rather than predetermined curriculum. Emergent curriculum is what emerges as a result of our understanding of the context, as a result of our conversation with the students. We might think that we'll be teaching something, but unfortunately, in the class, we might not be teaching what we wanted to teach because the situation over there totally different. So we should not assume that we will be able to teach as per our own teaching plan. It doesn't approve of that. So teachers should not be told what they should be teaching in the classroom. They are sensible. They know what they have to do in the classroom. So based on the emerging conditions, you might think that these are all philosophical. You might think that these things may not be, these things cannot be implemented in our classroom. I agree with you. They are impossible. They are not at all practical. These are all what I am stating. These are all certain demerits, or these are the certain reasons why this particular approach has not been very, very popular. But they should be actually concerned about this process, that too much of emphasis on teaching, too much of emphasis on predetermined curriculum is not going to help us. And then it does away with mechanical teaching and mechanical learning, and it doesn't want the learners to be passive. We don't want the learners to be passive. We don't want the learners to receive what has been told. Learners have to be active. They got to engage themselves in the process. It's a passive learning, not active learning, which means each and every individual in the classroom would be participating, would be contributing something or other to the development of the classroom process. And, this approach is against the system which manipulates the students. How are the students manipulated? Rewards and fear of punishment. Because of these two reasons, rewards and fear of punishment, the innate interest, the real interest of the students lost. So we have to go beyond it. It's not just a reward alone. Don't treat us as animals. Don't think that we can be happy by receiving chocolates. Don't think that we can be happy, if some marks have been given. Not always. We will be learning only when we believe what we are learning is useful to us. So you got to create that kind of interest in us. That is the context that we need to create. Rewards and punishment, that punishment theory, that if you don't do that, then I will do like this. I think it does away with that. It doesn't like that kind of approach. And then it is against factory model of education. Education, it's a natural process. We should not assume that there is a standard here and we will be defining the standards and based on which education should be imparted. I think this standards can be applied only in factories. So we are against this kind of factory model of education. So what is the goal of education then? Human development, personal growth, and the third one is self-actualization. This is an important statement. What is this self-actualization? Process of becoming anything that we are capable of becoming. We actually believe that each and every individual in the class capable of becoming what that individual dreams of becoming. So there is a power. There is a power of individual to become what the person wants to become. This is called self-actualization. This self-actualization might happen in a class only when these three conditions satisfied. Condition number one, students have to be valued. They should be valued, meaning whatever be their contribution, whatever be their background, you got to give them feeling that they are important. They are important to our process. They're important to the class. So they should be valued. Number two, they should be accepted. It's not the question of right or wrong. It's a question of acceptance and non-acceptance. So students, they should be given a feeling that they are accepted. They might be giving wrong answers, but they should be given a feeling that they are accepted. Answers could be subjected to debate, but their presence, their understanding, not going to be a subject of debate. Your understanding is valued. Your answer accepted, but it has to be put to test, but could be accepted. The third one, respected. So when students are valued, when students are accepted, when they are respected, then there is a process, the process called self-exploration. And in this self-exploration process, students will actually activate self-actualization model. This self-actualization would lead them to success in learning. So this is the condition. These are the three conditions that are to be in place if self-actualization has to take place. In other words, we got to give the control to the students. Rather than teachers having control, students having control. Teachers becoming mere facilitators. Don't think that when I say facilitators, they don't need to do anything. They got to do a lot of things, but they got to do silently. They got to do a lot of things, but what they are doing, not interference. They got to do a lot of things, but students might not know that they are doing a lot of things. So that kind of strategy required in humanist class. In short, I would say no authority, no power, no actual teaching. Teaching should take place as if it is not taking place at all. Learning should take place as if not taking place at all. Things unknown should be suggested as things forgotten. That's the kind of teaching that we need to appreciate here. And again, it is essentially based on this belief that human nature is essentially good and subject to evolve. You don't need to teach anything. Teaching is natural. Learning is natural. Nothing can be taught, but everything can be learned. But what we are supposed to do, create conditions wherein learning would be taking place automatically. Rather than talking about, CLOs and PLOs, course learning outcomes, program learning outcomes, aligning this with that, I think this is a market-oriented approach. This approach, I think, is not going to lead us anywhere. We have done enough damage in the name of this quality. We got to do away with that. We got to appreciate inherent values of teaching. We got to bring in individuality in teaching. We got to bring out the inherent talents of our students rather than creating a context wherein you are shaping the students in your own image, which I don't agree. So teaching becomes effortless if these conditions are put in place. In the words of Jazan, I like to quote Jazan here. Jazan says, The best way to teach language, the secret is there. The secret is, you once you create conditions for learning, you don't need to do teaching. Learning will take place. Students would be able to, he says, learners would be able to pick up the language only when the learners understand it. You'll be able to speak a language once you understand that. Then, for understanding what is required, you got to present to them comprehensible inputs. You got to present to them inputs which are understandable. If you present to them the inputs which are understandable, then learning becomes automatic, teaching effortless, learning effortless. Now, how can we present? How can you do that? Grayson's approach is that he says, introduce short stories, narrations, bring in a lot of narrations, talk about real life situations, talk about real life challenges, talk about things which are connected to them, talk about things which worry them, talk about their own challenges, something which is immediate, something which is next to them, talk about their friends, talk about their relatives. So bring topics to the classroom. These topics are humanist content topics, something they could connect to. If you could create that situation, I'm sure that you'll be able to initiate a process which would lead to wonderful learning. So these are all the things that we got to keep in mind. These are the assumptions on which humanistic approach to language teaching built. Now, at a point, humanistic approach to language teaching, if you follow it, you'll understand at a point of time, both teachers and learners, they are one. They become one at a point of time. What is the point of time? The point of time is when there is an engagement in the classroom, when there is an interaction in the classroom, when there is an understanding in classroom, when the hearts come together, when the feelings come together, when we put humans at the center, when you put their interest at the center, the emotion at the center, then students and teachers will be connected emotionally. Once they are connected, students and teachers, they become one in this process. Then the question is, what are the strategies? How can we adopt it? There are so many, but I'll be suggesting a few. The first one is we need to create a curriculum based on this. What kind of curriculum it is? It is going to be humanist content curriculum. In humanistic content curriculum, we got to actually include the topics relevant to the students, relevant to the context. It could be anything. It could be, cooking or jogging or, weightlifting or finding an employment, anything for the matter, anything that interests them. Create curriculum in such a way, organize things in such a way that anything interesting to them, bring them. Is it possible in our system? That is not a question that we need to debate. Number two, humanist process curriculum. In process curriculum, we got to teach them assertiveness. We got to teach them how to trust themselves, how to respect themselves, self-esteem, self-love, self-care. We need to teach them how to engage in the process of respecting themselves. So dignity, self-respect, self-worth, these are the things to be included there. Also, we need to recreate a school system, a learning system wherein no determined way of learning, no fixed method, no fixed mode of teaching and learning. What we have to do then? It should be open. We have to move from classroom to learning stations. We need to move away. We need to move away from textbooks to real life situations. We got to engage in alternative methods of assessment. Students should be able to monitor their own progresses. We got to focus more on life skills combined with cooperative learning, which a kind of a change of system, a change of structure. Then we need to engage in cooperative learning. In cooperative learning, they'll be learning from one another. And we have to engage in emotional literacy classes, how to understand the feelings of others, how to be respectful towards others, how can we create conditions for caring, culture for caring. And also we need to engage in the process of community language learning, wherein students would decide what they want to learn. They'll be sitting in circle to decide what is going to be taught today, what is going to be learned tomorrow, how can we evaluate ourselves. We need to actually include them as partners in the process of learning. Then Suggestopedia. a new method of learning, Suggestopedia, wherein we include, music, drama, art, all these things integrated. The idea is students should feel comfortable, relaxing, comfortable environment. And then teachers, what the teacher should do, silent way, adopt the silent way. It is not that you are mute. When I say silent, then what will you do in my class? It's not that you are mute. You are observant. You have to observe the things. You are observant, and you got to follow what's happening, and you got to take down notes. And what all you take down, based on your observation, you go to write in a diary, that is teacher development diary. You got to write in it, and there you have to identify the point that you should discuss with your colleagues to understand how we can change the system, how we can include new models of teaching. So Suggestopedia, bringing in art and music and other things to the classroom in silent way. You got to let students learn by initiating a process. The students would learn on their own. They correct their own mistakes. You be a silent learner. There are mistakes they commit. Understand them. Why are they because you all know in error analysis, mistakes are signs of learning. When you find errors, which is as a result of the ignorance, the types of errors they commit, which would help you understand where they stand in terms of learning, rather than you are doing talking. When you let them talk, you will understand what you have to do to engage in that repair activity. Then self-evaluation is another thing that we need to encourage students to do. Let them evaluate themselves critically. Let them evaluate themselves. And then you can also include flip teaching here. In flip teaching, well, you make them watch video. You ask them to follow a football match. You ask them to watch a film and come to the class. Let them discuss this. So these are some of the strategies that we could list out, in our humanistic approaches to language teaching. As you all know that I'm talking fast, you might not be able to list them out. You might not be able to keep those things in mind. And I'm sure that this is on whatever I'm presenting, it will be recorded. You will be able to go back and then take down the thing. But still, to fresh up your memory, to accentuate what all I've said, I talked about the first strategy, humanistic content curriculum. The second one, humanistic process curriculum. Then number third one, restructuring the structure that we have. Then the fourth one, cooperative learning. And the fifth one, emotional literacy classes. And the sixth one, community language learning. The seventh one, Suggestopedia. Then eighth one, silent way. And the ninth one, self-evaluation. And the lastly, flip teaching. So these are the ways, these are the strategies that we could adopt. Now, there are certain demerits. I know many of you might not agree with what I'm saying. You may be saying these are all theoretical positions. These are philosophical outpourings. These are all too idealistic. Not possible. I understand that. But should be made possible. What are the demerits? It is ambiguous. It is vague. You all know. The system will not let us do in this way. Low achieving students might not get benefit out of this. You all know. I agree with you. And you would say, as a result of which, no benefit at all. It is time consuming. I agree with you. These are all the demerits. I agree with you. But we got to make this happen. We have to work that it should become reality in our classes. Now, I don't want to quote some examples elsewhere to convince you. We are actually good on our own standing. We don't need to have examples from outside. Because I am teaching in a foreign university, and I've been to different universities in my career, and I've taken up teaching assignments in so many different places. I know how things have been done. I can quote, but I'm not here to influence you with that, because you have a context. That context is different from the context I am placed. So applying your contextual intelligence, what is best in your own way. So with this, let me sum up the essence of humanistic approaches to language teaching. There are two important terms I would like to say. Number one, interact. Engage in the process of interaction in the classroom. Interact and interact. That's the first thing. Then comes collaboration. Once you interact, then you'll be able to collaborate. So interact and then interaction resulting in collaboration. When interaction results in collaboration, it results in participation. When it results in participation, then you'll be able to initiate participatory learning, collaborative learning, community learning. That is the success of language teaching from humanistic perspective. Now, after having discussed this, let me give you the summary of this. Number one, why I like this, for a few reasons. Number one, I like this approach because, number one, this approach recognizes me as an individual. I, being an individual, being respected, recognized. I may be in a group. I should not be lost in a group. I have my own limitations. I have my own shortcomings. I have my own strengths. So what this approach does is it respects my individuality. It approves of my individuality. It recognizes my presence as an individual. This is number one. Number two, it ignores my background. It doesn't talk about my background. My background doesn't matter. My capability doesn't matter. My age doesn't matter. My family doesn't matter. It doesn't actually talk about your background. Where you are from, where you are from, it doesn't matter to me. Where you are right now matters to me. So I like this method because it doesn't peep into your past. Nobody going to pass a judgment on you based on your past records. That's what we are doing normally in the classes. We actually pass judgment on students based on their past performances. Because your 12th class score is that much and you have to be like this. Because your first semester, second semester score is like this, you should be like this. Who has given us this kind of authority to predict what is unpredictable? Humanistic approach is against this particular method, this kind of prediction, which I believe is an arrogance. It is an arrogance. It is not just insensitivity. So the second important reason why I think we should be following is that it ignores my capability, my family, my previous experiences and all. The third one, this creates a condition wherein I learn from everyone. Everyone can learn from everyone. No teacher, no student. We all one in learning. So there are things that students can learn from teachers. There are also things that teachers can learn from students. So no teacher at all, everyone, because this is conditioning. You're creating condition wherein we all are learners and no one is a teacher. What is teaching then? Context is teaching. Situation is teaching. So this is the reason why this particular approach should be placed amidst us. The fourth one is it identifies the shortcomings, the weaknesses and strengths of individuals. And once I, as an individual, could identify my own shortcomings and weaknesses, then I don't need anyone's help. I'll be able to reorient myself to the process. I'll be able to engage in self-directional mode of learning. Hence, I think this is a wonderful way of understanding where I am and what I am. It helps me understand my own strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes I would decide whether I can fit in or not. Sometimes I would say that this is not a class for me. I can go to a different level. So I'll be able to realize where my strengths actually lie, rather than getting lost in a crowd. Then, in this particular context, in humanistic mode, language teaching, acceptance in place, open-mindedness. We accept everyone. We will not pass judgments on people based on the shortcomings, based on their language limitations. We all appreciate whatever they say. There are lapses, there are errors, there are mistakes. We all understand, we accept them because these are all natural reflections. These are the reflections reflecting different stages of learning. So we would not actually shame anyone because of the mistakes. The affective filter is not going to be on always, not off always. We will make them, feel comfortable with what they are. Normally, because of the mistakes that we identify, the students' affective filter is on. They become too self-conscious. When they become too self-conscious, well, they will not be able to speak naturally. So acceptance. And then we create sensitivity in the class, respecting one another, respecting the system, creating sensitivity. Also, here, learning takes place beyond the classroom, because classroom is just suggestion here. In flipped teaching, you will be doing a lot of learning activities outside the classroom. You'll be doing a project outside. You'll be watching a film outside. You'll be watching a match outside. You'll have interaction with people outside. Whatever you bring into the classroom as a result of your interactions elsewhere, that particular knowledge going to that particular knowledge going to be discussed, and that's going to be a value addition to this particular process. And then there is an attitudinal shift in this particular approach. The attitudinal shift is that we will look at not as what a student is learning, has learned, but we will be looking at what a student is capable of learning. So what a student capable of learning is more important here than what the student has achieved in this learning scale. Looking at someone's achievement, passing judgment on his learning is not at all right here. We have to understand that everyone is an endless possibility. Every learner, an endless possibility. Possibility is always there. Why are we here to take it away from them? So let them grow according to their own theories of growth. Let's not define their growth. And then there's an attitudinal shift. And then it encourages storytelling. You bring lots of stories to the classroom. You bring lots of anecdotes to the classroom. And that classroom becomes lively, enjoyable. That is the benefit of getting connected to this particular approach. So let me list out the sense. Number one, why I like it. Number one, individuals respected. Number two, it ignores my previous background, my personal my background, my educational background, my family background. Number three, creating a condition wherein we learn from everyone. Number four, it helps me identify my own strengths and weaknesses. Number five, creating condition for caring. As a result, I feel acceptance and open-mindedness. Then number six, it creates sensitivity in me. I became humane in my understanding of others' problems. And then here learning takes place beyond the classroom. Not classroom is just a reflection. Learning will not take place within the four walls of classroom alone. Something beyond the classroom is also possible. And there is an attitudinal shift. Attitudinal shift is, well, don't look at what a student has actually learned and passed judgment. Look at what a student is capable of learning. And then stories, anecdotes, these are all brought in here. Because of these reasons, my class becomes very, very lively. So these are the reasons why I believe this humanistic approach should be in place. So with this, I think I have come to the end of the first part of my talk, teaching language by adopting humanist perspective. I don't know whether I have time for the second part of my talk. I will not take more time. Maybe I'll be able to complete it in just 5 to 10 minutes time maximum, and then finish it off. The second part is, how can we adopt humanistic approach to teach literature? How can you do that? Well, there are lots of things I want to share, but I like to limit myself with one particular idea, for which I like to quote Paul Smith, a famous writer, thinker, a professor of English. And I like to quote an article which he has recently written, Political Responsibility of Teaching Literature. And I'm going to quote from his article. In this particular article, he talks about humanistic perspectives to language teaching, but literature teaching. And Paul Smith starts this article with a few assertions. Those assertions are not important, but let me just read them out. The first assertion is that our liberal goodwill, our political will, is not exercisable within the confines of our academy. That is his assertion. The second assertion today is literature today under threat, because literature has been increasingly displaced and replaced by theories. Second assertion, which not important now for our discussion, but I'm just quoting. And now, teaching literature this is the third important point. Teaching literature is essentially engaging ourselves in a political act. And as a result of this engagement, through teaching of literature, we are creating social relation. This is an important point. So when I teach literature, what I'm doing in the classroom is, I go to the classroom with the textbook in my hand. There is socio-political relation that is already subsisting in the classroom. My textbook and my teaching, giving a perspective to the students, as a result of that perspective, the political social relations that are in place in the classroom getting altered, getting adjusted. This, I think, is a politics of teaching. We have to identify this kind of teaching, and we got to restrain ourselves from this kind of influence. Now, universities and colleges and schools, they are actually crucial for the protection of social relations. So micro-political relations already subsisting in the classroom. subsisting between students and teachers, and among students and teachers, among teachers and academia. So because of this particular reason, teaching is irrefutably political. And he quotes Bourdieu, and that's why I think humanistic approach to teaching of literature is very much important today. Bourdieu, according to Bourdieu's opinion, teaching itself is a part of system of reproduction for a society. So when you engage in teaching, you are engaging yourself in a part of reproduction. What is this reproduction? Reproduction of ideas, reproduction of values. You are creating a condition for change over there. And now this teaching, this change is result of the agent. The agent is a teacher. The teacher's ability to hierarchize, listing things out according to teachers' preferences, discriminate, and then by engaging in a kind of reading, you are recognizing, appreciating various legitimate culture markers and symbols. So in this process, what a teacher does is, the teacher brings his own perspectives. The teacher brings in the perspective advanced by the author. And the result of this is the existing socio-political relation among the students getting altered. Now the question is, what is that we should do? I would say this has to be stopped. This should be stopped. This act of teaching is not humanist teaching. It's not humanistic way of understanding literature. The perspectives that you bring in, as a result of you being an authorial position, or as a result that someone has written somewhere, should not alter the existing conditions over there, because that is a political manifestation. Now here, I would like to give an example from Gayatri Spivak. Gayatri Spivak talks about Mahaswata Devi's The Breast Giver. And there, the question is this: if the text Mahaswata Devi's Breast Giver, if it is presented in a foreign context, the context wherein I'm placed, now you tell me, if I place the text in my context, if the text is negotiated in a foreign pedagogical situation, and the text, through teaching of the text, I am bringing something that something assimilates into the culture capital of this particular society. So this process of engagement, according to Gayatri, is wrong. We need to understand this influence. This influence should not be interfering influence. So what we should do, how we should be dealing with, that is what I'm going to present now. So what we should do, we got to engage in a responsible way of teaching. Don't present it in that way, you generalize it. There must be a strategy to generalize it, which means we got to look at, well, the foreign text from the point of view of cultural historian and literary critic. Those two roles. The two roles are cultural historian, literary critic. And these two roles critically interrupt. Of course, they negotiate, they interact, they interrelate. Hence, the point is, when a text is brought into the classroom, the text has to be necessarily alienated. We got to alienate the text from the culture which has actually produced it. If that particular thing is not alienated, if you bring with the text the culture which has produced the text, then what you are doing is you are imposing your cultural understanding of a different context, which is not actually humanistic approach. Hence, when you bring a text to a classroom, the text has to be necessarily alienated, which means let me read the text in my own way. Let the students read their own way. You think of humanistic perspectives, language teaching over there, the same approach. So any text is not at home is a prerequisite to understand that. Remember the statement. Any text, for the matter, is not at home. The text belongs nowhere. Is a prerequisite to understand that. So what we should do, we got to create a condition wherein we should resist this kind of culture imposition. So resistance to text and resistance to the code that informs the values and resistance to the subject position itself. This resistance is called agency. Why this resistance? Why should I resist this? Because the purpose of the resistance to the text would be to inhibit us, to prevent us from giving privilege to any particular voice, any particular group as bearers of knowledge or shapers of history. Otherwise, we would be giving a kind of credibility, We'll be giving a kind of voice to the people as the bearers of truth, the shapers of history. That is what's happening today. So let's not be a party to this process. So resist this kind of thing. So don't let a text come with its own culture. It has to be necessarily alienated. Let me understand it from my own context and culture. Let me give my meaning to it. In other words, I would say, let's return the text to the students' lives. Relate the text to the student's voice. Let's relate to this text to the students' experiences. Let's encourage our students to understand the text as discursive system, a discursive system of exploitation. And also, students should be sensitized to understand the dominations that surround the text, how the text has been used to dominate their culture symbols. The students should be able to understand. Hence, it is necessary to begin and re-begin the process of privileging students' writing as a creative act or as an interactional act in relation to the culture that produces the text. So what is it we should do? You bring Gayatri's or you bring Mahaswata Devi's text to the classroom, place it before our context. It is a foreign context. Our students might not be able to understand, but doesn't matter. Let me apply my culture values to that. Let me try to write a response to that. So what I should do, I got to encourage secondary literature, students writing, because I relate the text to my life and my experiences. Then I decide whether the text is okay for me or not. I will not let the text interfere my socio-political relation. I don't want to give a kind of privilege to a particular text as bearer of a particular value. No, not at all. Value I give, essence I give, life mine. Text should negotiate with me. So I negotiate with the text through my culture symbols, my culture engagements, and then decide how much of this text that is coming to me I can accept and I should resist. So I should actually encourage my students to engage in this kind of resistance. That's how we should do. That's how we should be teaching English literature. That's how we should be teaching world literature. Not just assimilation of whatever values presented. Question them, understand them, relevant or not to our context. Engage in the process. There is nothing called universal value. It is a construction. It is a negotiation. So no authority needed in the shape of culture code. No authority needed in the shape of explanatory code. Our authority as teachers are constituted in and by the same codes in which we are interrelated. So no authority as such. So in other words, I would say, a pedagogy of humanities should be an arena of cultural explanation, which should question explanations of culture. So that is the essence of humanistic approach to teaching of literature. So what we should do, we got to come out with this kind of resistance, and we got to take a stand here. So what is that stand that we should take? The stand is this: a choice between the complicity of the politics of value and a refusal of that complicity. The complicity of politics of value is that whether you would become a partner here, engage in the process, the same process, letting the particular culture of the text influencing your students, or being a force of resistance to that process and engaging that particular text from your own culture angle, and then understanding the forces of exploitation, the forces of domination, and then dealing with them appropriately by applying your common sense and culture knowledge. So what are you going to do? Complicity of the politics of value or refusal of the complicity? Between these two, what is going to be your choice? I would say my choice is later. I don't want to teach literature. The literature, when it eradicates and elites the social relations. I don't want to be a part of that community of language teachers. I don't want to be a part of that community of literature teachers. I want to be a part of that community of language teachers and literature teachers who would be questioning the process of this kind of engagement, culture engagement. I would analyze, I would be respectful, but I would not let them, give me a feeling that they have a privileged position just because it is offered in a textual form. So we need to engage ourselves in making and unmaking of several methodologies to view classroom as an arena of interrelation, which is possible when we apply humanistic approach to literature teaching. So let's bring literature to the scrutiny of the students. Let the students explore the ways in which they can understand, create their own experiences. Let them resist any sort of cultural imposition that springs from that particular text. So subjecting the text to the context of the students and privileging the students' understanding over the imposed understanding is an act of humanistic approach in language in teaching of literature. So what is that we should do? We got to privilege students' understanding over the assumed textual understanding of it. So privileging the students' understanding over the imposed understanding, that itself is an act of humanistic approach in teaching of literature. I know that it is a very big challenge, but we all have to come together to intensify the challenge that our profession is currently feeling today, and we should decide whether we could become truly teachers of literatures or not. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best. Are you there with me? Thank you. Can I get questions? Yeah, can I get questions from audience if they have any? Thank you. I can't see them. Are they there? I can't see them. Can you please? Okay. Can you please show the audience so that I can see them? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for tolerating me such a long time. Thank you. Yeah.
Sir, good evening, sir. This is Venkat. Sir, you spoke
Hi,
about,
Venkat. How are you?
fine, sir. Thank you, sir. How are you, sir? Yeah. Sir, you spoke about political interference in literature. Is that highly possible in this era? You know that how politically tight we are in this era. So is that easy for a teacher to speak politics in the class?
See, language is politics. Language is politics. Literature is politics. Anything that you say, politics. So politics, you can't escape from that influence. Politics is always there. You can't escape from that influence. So what I'm trying to say here is that we all, when we sit in the class, we all have our own micro political social relations. We all have. So the micro political relations subsisting in a classroom should not be disturbed by an external force. So what we have to do, we got to subject an external text to our own understanding. So negotiate that, take it and then subject that to our own scrutiny and see that whether it is related to our experiences, related to our lives or not. And then identify if there are certain political forces, if there are certain symbols of exploitation that are presented through the text. Because we should not give a kind of privileging position to a text just because it happens to be a text. That's what's happening. Whatever comes from outside, whatever is presented, we think this is the best thing. This is not the way in which I think we should be dealing. This is not humanist approach. In humanist approaches, I should believe in myself, I should believe in my culture, I should believe in my context. Of course, change is required. We all will change, we all will evolve. But letting myself influenced by others just because it comes from elsewhere, I think that's not the way in which we should look at it. So for your question, my answer is that we can't escape from being political. My statement is also political. Someone would say that I'm making a political statement. But what I want to say here is we should do it responsibly. So there is a political responsibility involved in teaching of literature. The political responsibility is this. When you bring a text to the classroom, the text has to be necessarily alienated. It has to be alienated from the context from which the text emerges, and then bring the text to your context. You bring your meaning to the text and encourage your students writing about the text. This is how we should encourage secondary literature, so that what we produce as text would become a subject matter of discussion elsewhere, rather than our having their text for discussion. Our text should also be discussed elsewhere. That's engagement here.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I have one question, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sir, we are living in
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think, see, this is your question also it's a very simple question, but the answer is problematic. I'll tell you the reason. What we need to do, we need to inculcate in our students um, the ability to question the narratives. We have different narratives on different things. So what is required is that academicality, the academic bent of mind, the critical bent of mind, to question it, subjecting that to scrutiny. That kind of critical bent of mind we need to inculcate in our students. But the point is that how can we take judgment? How can we take decisions? But I think there is a way of living in this world without taking positions. We don't need to take positions, but we need to understand the discursive practices as teachers. So what I do, I debate and discuss, but I don't want to determine, because once I conclude, then there is a problem. Once I conclude anything, then the conclusion gives me arrogance, and there is no scope for any kind of discussion thereafter. So I would say, in an academic context, the discussion will be like this: bring any idea for the matter, whatever be the side, left or right, doesn't matter. Let's discuss. Let's engage in discursive practices. Discursive practices. Let the truth emerge. Truth is a negotiation between you and me. Let it emerge, rather than taking a position on it. When you take a position on the statement that you make, then I think you are inviting trouble, because that is the time at which you close your mind and you become very arrogant, because you think you have concluded it. Once you have concluded, there is no scope for discussion. There is no scope for any kind of analysis once you concluded it. So once you conclude something as truth, then you will think that it is absolutism. And then this conclusion gives you arrogance. This conclusion gives you pride. And not only that, and you will try to die for the truth, and that will lead you to commit murder for the truth, because you kill for the truth, because you think this is right. So this is not an academic way of understanding reality. So even in the post-truth world, lots of ideas may come in the classroom, but we got to subject everything to the scrutiny, and we got to teach our students that there is a way of living in this world without taking position, without passing judgment. Because what is judgment all about? Judgment is death. Once you pass judgment, you die there. Life is an endless opportunity. It's an endless possibility. Let all ideas come. Let's interact with all these ideas. We will subject all these ideas to our own understanding. Let's negotiate. So that kind of spirit of doubting, questioning, skepticism, we need to inculcate in our students. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Just a minute, please. And thank you for your invitation. I thank the organizing team for having identified this wonderful theme, and it's really because I know that it is an inspiring title for many, but it is need of the hour. And thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you participants for your patient hearing. Hope our paths will cross once again. Getting back to you later point of time. Thank you very much. Goodbye to everybody. All the best.